hard to believe that there are people in the world who are genuinely evil, with little to no remorse for human life. But these people most definitely exist, hidden in plain sight, and a prime example of the horrors people are capable of against others is with Ayumi Kuboki, a former nurse at Oguchi Hospital in Yokohama, Japan, currently serving a life term for some of the most despicable reasons. Not much of Ayumi's background is known, but what is known is that in 2008, she received her nursing license at Oguchi Hospital. Nothing of note occurs for a couple years, and it is assumed the hospital was running completely normally, with nothing in particular going on. That all changed during late 2016, when an unusually high number of patients under care were dying unexpectedly, with no known cause. These deaths could have been easily written off as just coincidences, but fellow nurses in the hospital were certain something more sinister must be going on somehow to explain these deaths. From July 2016 to September 2016, 48 patients died at the hospital. In August of that year, 5 additional patients would die in one day, along with 4 in one day in early September. Suspicions continued to rise for the residents of the hospital, some saying that an angel of death was the cause of these strange happenings. This high frequency of unexpected deaths continued until nurse suspicions were coincidentally confirmed when, after another sudden death of an unemployed man, one of the nurses attending the man accidentally dropped an infusion bag used on the patient, which started to bubble unexpectedly. Knowing this was unusual for an infusion bag to start supposedly causing some sort of reaction, the incident was immediately reported to the Kanagawa police. After an autopsy was put in forth of the recently deceased man and the contents of the bag analyzed, police were shocked to find extremely high levels of a common antiseptic, along with a surfactant or detergent. This warranted an immediate call for all infusion bags to be inspected, and investigators found up to 10 bags with a small hole from a needle on the rubber stoppers of these infusion bags. Someone had administered fatal doses of a mixture of disinfectant and an antiseptic into these patients. The nurses and staff's suspicions were confirmed. Someone with medical knowledge purposefully poisoned patients at the hospital in what seemed to be an indiscriminate way. Storing the original IV bag as evidence, the investigators working with the prefectural police thoroughly investigate and listen to the accounts of up to 2,000 people, mainly hospital personnel, but to no avail, with no concrete evidence being confirmed. This was due to the lack of any strong eyewitness testimonies, and security cameras were not installed at the time. According to investigators working on the crime scene, due to the lack of data on what the lethal dose of a surfactant administered by IV drip, along with the fact that the mixture found in the IV bags were used in various locations of the hospital, investigators could not definitively pinpoint the happenings as murderous intent. Investigators would then go on to state that this case was one of the most difficult cases in the history of the prefectural police. However, investigators believed that there was no reasonable explanation other than there had to be some sort of culprit to these happenings, so searching for more evidence continued, despite the lack thereof. Considerable time passed, until finally in 2018, the police found what they needed after inspecting hospital inventory and examining employee clothing. Traces of the mixture used in the IV bags were found in the pockets of nurse Ayumi Kuboki. Prefectural police also secretly installed cameras during the investigation, showing Ayumi walking around night shift with a drug she was not meant to be assigned to or administer and carry. She was immediately pinpointed as the prime suspect quickly after and confirmed the suspicions of the investigators even more when a colleague of Ayumi's claimed that she had seen Ayumi with a patient she was not assigned to, and shortly thereafter, the patient's condition worsened and would later pass away. June 2018, prefectural police would begin to interview Kuboki with all the evidence gathered thus far. During an interview, she would admit to dosing patients with a mixture of surfactant and antiseptics. I also administered antiseptic solutions with other patients. I did that to about 20. During questioning, Kuboki reportedly told police that she was only targeting seriously ill patients who she believed would die during her shift. Ayumi was swiftly charged with murder on July 17th, then charged again shortly after with more murder charges. After her arrest, however, when confronted by TV stations and newspapers, Ayumi would send letters in denial of the accusations against her and responsibility. In later interviews, according to psychiatrist Tamami Katara, Kuboki's true motive might have been a way to enact revenge on her colleagues and bosses by killing patients during the working hours of other nurses in a possible attempt to ruin their careers. But no motive has been 100% confirmed. She would then go on to be charged with 5 more counts of murder as more evidence came forth. Ayumi's trial would begin on October 1st, 2021. Prosecutors argued for the death penalty, while the defendant's side claimed that she was not fully conscious of her actions due to schizophrenia. The Yokohama District Court would recognize that Kuboki was autistic at their final judgment, but was not a contributing factor, and would reject the appeal to her schizophrenia, as it was concluded that she was legally sane at the time she committed the murders. She was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. Oguchi Hospital would go on to change their name to Yokohama Hajime Hospital after the crimes, and temporarily closed in 2019. The hospital would apologize to the public for not preventing such a horrific act in a place that should have been protecting patients. Ayumi, on the other hand, was only convicted of the deaths directly linked to her. However, the majority of the bodies needed to be analyzed for potential traces of the poison used for the murders had already been cremated by families, unfortunately, and so any evidence that could link Ayumi to up to 50 deceased during the time frames of her killing are lost forever. What makes this story so terrible is the fact that Ayumi was a nurse, a trained professional, with the sole job of protecting patients and gaining their trust. Whether her intentions were to resolve petty career prospects, or just in cold blood, up to 50 victims and their families will never have closure as to what truly happened to their loved ones. Hopefully, Ayumi will realize the full extent of the horrific crimes she has committed in a life behind bars.